Picture a bundle of knotted cords that does arithmetic, a ledger that fits in a palm. Archaeologists called it quipu, colonial officials called it dangerous.
Welcome to Stargate Codex. I am Dr. Elias Thorn.
The paradox I want to foreground is simple and stubborn. Across unrelated cultures, complex textile systems appear where we expect written records to dominate. This is not decoration. It is durable information encoded in thread, knot, and grid.
Turn first to Mesopotamia and the Aegean. Imagine temple accounts not only naming grain rations, but specifying wool, warp, 12 units. Why does the economy record cloth with that precision? Because textiles were measured, mobilized, and accounted for like bullion, woven into administration itself. Sumerian clay tablets from the late 4th to 3rd millennium BCE list wool, loom gear, and standardized weights with institutional vocabulary repeated across temple complexes. Centuries later, Linear B workshop tablets from Pylos and Knossos record workshop outputs in terse, repeatable formulae, workers by task, quantities of warp and weft, lengths of cloth rolls. The record treats cloth as a counted value. Move the lens north and east to the Pazyryk burials in the Altai. Beneath permafrost lay carpets with consistent weave counts, recurring grid units, and icon fields preserved intact for millennia. Archaeologists note parallels between the thread count grid and metrological standards used in nearby monuments. So, cloth carried the same grid logic as a temple plan? Exactly. The grid repeats across media, not merely in one isolated object. Thread counts align with modular ratios found in architecture, suggesting a shared metrological language. Cross the Atlantic and the functionality persists, though the technology diverges. Spanish chroniclers described quipu as knotted cord registers used for accounting and calendrical reckoning. Surviving quipu show knot placement, cord spacing, and color fields forming positional relationships analogous to place value notation. Colonial administrators recognized quipu as an alternative ledger and often suppressed it for that reason. Return to Europe. Monastic and order inventories cataloged mantles, sashes, and aprons with precise border motifs, fringe counts, and knot arrangements. A 13th-century Templar inventory lists mantles by border repeat and fringe notes. 17th-century Rosicrucian emblem books describe veils by banding and symbol placement. These are garment records organized by pattern rather than narrative. Methodologically, 3 evidence classes matter: administrative tablets that register textiles as commodities, surviving textiles with measurable grid logic, and documentary inventories or emblem books that tie pattern to protocol. Where 2 or 3 of these overlap, inference is strongest. Where they do not, caution is required. How would a knot become a motor? Think of the loom as an analog processor. Warp and weft make a rectangular array, each crossing a discrete cell. Knot type, position, and count become variables. An overhand knot at the 3rd thread versus a long knot at the 7th, when systematized, operate as distinct glyphs in a positional array. Color fields and repeated units act as bases and multipliers. The Andean quipu provides a direct analog. Knot placement along a cord's axis conveys magnitude. Knot type and cluster spacing convey category. Translate that logic onto a woven grid, and you have a 2-dimensional, multi-layered notation capable of encoding calendars, metrological tables, and ritual sequences. Where temple blueprints use modular grids, Egyptian cubit divisions, Hellenistic harmonic ratios, textiles associated with those institutions mirror the same modular logic. A border of 13 repeats might map to a calendrical count, a color band of 5 fields to a ritual stage. Stone and cloth speak the same mathematical language. Why would initiatory networks prefer cloth? Because garments are portable, visible to initiates, and inscrutable to outsiders without a key. A sash that encodes ritual days functions as both credential and compact archive. A guild apron with weave density correlated to access privileges enforces hierarchy without a written roster.
This explains a systemic pattern. Where literate registers were monopolized, textiles enabled peripheral nodes to preserve alternate knowledge pathways. Textile encoding reduces reliance on scribes, standardizes ritual practice across distance, and embeds metrological authority into everyday material culture.
We must also be rigorous about limits. Directly attributing semantic content to a motif without corroboration is risky. Regional weaving grammars vary. Motifs can shift meaning across time and place. The best evidence requires 3 converging signals: measurable metrological alignment, documentary pairing that links pattern to usage, and contextual continuity across artifacts or inventories. Where those converge, confidence grows. Where they do not, hypotheses remain provisional.
You're saying this is a consistent technology across time?
Yes. Textiles and knots recur as conserved archival technologies, positional, modular, and symbolic systems that map onto metrological and calendrical frameworks. Sometimes they stand alongside stone inscriptions. Sometimes they serve as parallel registers where writing was restricted. The implication is methodological. Incorporate textile matrices into core archival practice instead of relegating them to ornament.
For practitioners, the protocol I propose in the notes requires stepwise testing. First, measure grid units and knot taxonomy against known metrological systems. Second, seek documentary pairing in inventories or chronicles. Third, test for replication across contexts. The protocol is falsifiable, region-specific, and transparent, designed to invite comparative replication and peer critique.
Consult the episode notes for an annotated primary source matrix, tablet references, measured textile diagrams, and the step-by-step decoding checklist. For scholars and archivists, replicate the tests against local weaving grammars and submit findings to the Stargate Codex dossier. The archive never lies. The text remains. That concludes our historical tracking of this specific anomaly within the Codex. The records show that behind the curtain of standard history lies a repeating, systemic mechanism of knowledge transmission and governance preserved across generations. We laid out the timeline, parsed primary texts, and exposed the architectural blueprint. The archive remains open for those who know how to read it.